Chapter 77. Blaze. Still chuckling to herself, a bemused Blaze left her mistress with Teo and Areithia. Really, they're all so charming together, and young Master Teo's obvious crush on the girl is very sweet. Moving along Orzova corridors, she snapped out commands to various minor servitors in order to assure that her 3 charges would be well provided for and comfortable. Food brought, the 2 teens especially liked Celestian plums, fireplaces stoked, beds turned down, etc., etc. Snug as 3 bugs in a rug. Honestly, there were few things more satisfying to Madame Blaze than a job well done for people who were grateful for her service, for mistresses and masters who could have a little fun and bring an honest smile to an old woman's face. Off duty for the time being, she practically sauntered out of the cathedral's porticos and into the open air, still carrying the sugar bowl. Walking down the broad street, still in view of the cathedral opulent, she passed many a member of the syndicate, from the lowliest and the poorest to the highest and the mightiest. She knew them all, and they all knew her, all acknowledged her with, at minimum, a polite nod of the head. Yes, even the biggest of big shots offered signs of respect to Madame Blaze as she passed. In the little pond that was the great cathedral, she knew she was a very big fish, someone who could get things done, someone, frankly, that you didn't want to cross. So they all courted her, at least to some degree, and certainly none would ever think to slight her. The last one who did wound up with a broom closet for an office and a near constant shortage of toilet paper, no matter which lavatory the now pathetic advocist attempted to use. And the best part about that man's misfortunes was that Blaze wasn't responsible for any of them. Other parties had arranged the young fool's travails, either because they didn't like the way the arrogant little snot had treated Madame, or because they sought to curry Madame's favor. More likely, both. When she was some distance from Orzova, she turned down an alley and turned into someone else entirely, a tall, male stranger. The stranger cast a quick spell, and the illusion upon the sugar bowl faded away, revealing it as Dovin Bond's severed left hand. The stranger exited the alley, now looking like a minor Rakdos demon. Soon, the demon, or some 4th or 5th shape, would be home at Duskmantle, the House Demir Guild Hall, where he, she, it or they could safely morph into Lazav, whoever he might be. As his demon form loped down a busy thoroughfare in a full view of many a Ravnican soul, Lazav contemplated Areithia Rat Shokta, who could only be seen by her mother, her godfather, Teo, Kaya, and Lazav himself. Of course, Lazav had known about Rat for over a decade and a half, since shortly after the girl was born. Right away he had realized that her unique condition would be extremely useful to him and House Demir, so unsurprisingly, he had been, and continued to be, determined to exploit it. The girl wasn't the first child Lazav had recruited, or perhaps a better word would be collected, nor was she likely to be the last. Why, just before Bolus had arrived on Ravnica, Lazav had added the infant Meritson to his collection, a child of obvious potential, though perhaps not nearly as much potential as young Areithia had possessed since birth. Hers was a truly special case. As soon as his spies had told him of her, Lazav had made his way to Gruul territory in the form of the centaur Baruvo, and had quickly been forced to shift into a somewhat generic minotaur when he found that Baruvo was already there. Baruvo and the girl's mother could see the babe, but even her own father could not. Nor could most anyone else. Approaching the crib, Lazov had been prepared to perceive it as empty, and then had quickly been forced to pretend that he did perceive it that way. For in fact, he could see the young Araethia and hear her start to cry. Her curse of insignificance did not affect him. Never for a moment was Araethia Shokta insignificant to me. And of course, that had made things much easier. As time passed and she grew from a baby to a little girl, he would approach her periodically, in one form or another, and have his kind little talks with the girl who was so grateful to be seen, before using his mental prowess to cause her to forget those chats seconds later. More often, he was extremely careful to pretend he couldn't see her at all. It had almost become a game, the way he was constantly trying to bump into her or mow her down unawares. Besides, it helped train her to be on her toes, aware of her surroundings and quick. Plus, it was just a little bit funny. Funnier than her prank with a sugar bowl, certainly. To this day, Rat believed she was gateless, though she had secretly been inducted into Dimir years ago, before being made to forget that as well. In fact, Lazov had brainwashed the girl into his perfect little secret assassin, creating an entirely different identity for Rat, Atkos Tar. The Dimir Guildmaster was a bit embarrassed by the clumsy reverse spelling of the name of Rat's alter ego. But Araethia had been so young when Lazov started working with her, on her, that such simplicity had been necessary. And surprisingly, though rumors of the deadly Atkos being one of Dimir's very best assassins ran the length and breadth of Ravnica, it hadn't occurred to anyone that Atkos was Rat. Probably helped that Atkos believed he was a male vampire and behaved that way. Or perhaps that didn't even figure into it. So few people knew about Rat at all. More had heard of Atkos, frankly, that it could hardly occur to them to make the connection. Lazov wasn't sure which was the real reason and didn't much care. As Blaze, Lazov had entered Rat's room the night before and had pretended not to see the girl to put her at ease. Then Blaze had addressed her as Atkos Tar, for her name was also her trigger word, one that placed her into a suggestible trance. Lazov/Blaze had given Atkos quick instructions, thought strands via compressed telepathy. Then Blaze had walked back into the hallway to show Teo a pre-prepared note. Lazov had long ago learned to fake Rat's handwriting, though he was fairly certain Teo had no idea what her handwriting looked like. Of course, Lazov sent Atkos to kill Dovin Bon, whose secret safe house had never been secret or safe from Lazov, who'd had spies watching it from the moment Bon had established it, long before Bolus had arrived on Ravnica. Thus, Lazov had known Bon was there from the moment he returned to Ravnica from Kaladesh. The Vidalcan, like all of Atkos's victims, never stood a chance against a killer too insignificant to notice. Rat had been programmed to go to her mother's after, and then return to Madame Blaze with Bon's hand concealed under a spell of illusion. The girl remembered nothing. She wasn't even aware her prank with the sugar bowl had simply been a means of handing the hand over to her handler. She executed everything perfectly, and to his embarrassment, it was Lazov who nearly did slip up, frankly, by referring to her as Mistress Araethia, despite the fact that Blaze had never been told the girl had any other name save Rat. No one noticed, of course. But that's no excuse. I cannot afford to grow complacent now, not at this crucial juncture. Lazov turned a corner and turned into a striking young elven woman, partially inspired by Amara Tandris as his thoughts turned to Vraska. The Gorgon might not know it yet, but she and the Golgari already belonged to Lazov and Demir. The shapeshifter would wait for his moment, letting the Golgari queen stew, and when the time was right, he'd bring forth Ban's left hand and reveal that her lies had placed her squarely under the Demir Guildmaster's thumb. Lazov contemplated Rat a little more. It was a shame there hadn't been the time or the opportunity to debrief her, gleaning every morsel of knowledge and intelligence she had gained while traveling to other worlds with Kaya. But that will come. At first, Lazov had been unhappy about Araethia leaving Ravnica for prolonged and ill-defined periods of time. Both Rat and Atkos were extremely useful to the shapeshifter, and initially, he didn't relish losing their services. But the more he thought about it, the more he warmed to the idea. Rat's alliance with Kaya extended Demir's reach beyond the Spy Master's own world, and in a multiverse full of planeswalking enemies and temporary allies, Atkos Tar might have considerably more work to do in his future. Chapter 78. Ral Zarek. Ral Zarek walked slowly home, taking the long way back to the Dog's Run apartment he shared with Tomic. As soon as the all-guild meeting was adjourned, Chamberlain Marie had called an emergency conference of the Azet League. Every high mucky muck in the Ismundi and the League had flocked there like vultures, and even Niv had been allowed, perhaps encouraged, to attend by Marie, since Ral had been the dragon's own choice to succeed him as guildmaster. Within seconds of the conference being called to order, Marie had launched her attack on Ral's leadership qualifications, quoting back his own words to him. "Ravnica needs to know. It can trust its leaders to defeat would-be conquerors and to bring its enemies to justice." Now that it was clear Ral had failed to do that, reason dictated, or so the Chamberlain suggested, that Ral must step down as Izet Guildmaster. Ral had seen this coming, but had held out some hope that others in the guild might be more sympathetic. They were not. When Marie had demanded his resignation, some seconded her motion, while others remained silent. No one spoke up to support him. Of course, Ral did not resign. After all, as he made clear to the gathered Leaguers, there was no way Marie could or would ever have the chance to fail the way he had. Marie wasn't a planeswalker, and Tezzeret wouldn't show his face on Ravnica again. So unless the Chamberlain had a plan for taking down the Artificer off-world, she might as well back the Crocked off. Marie, of course, had no such plan, so Ral took advantage of her somewhat embarrassed silence to remind her and everyone that he could have lied about killing Tezzeret, but had refused to betray his guild and his world in that way. He then did something particularly bold, even reckless, insisting on a vote of confidence in his leadership. To Marie's chagrin, and in stark contrast with the lack of support he had garnered only minutes earlier, Ral won near unanimous approval from those present. Still, I wish it hadn't come to that. Glancing at Niv Mizzet, who had remained silent throughout the conference, Ral had initially felt confident the dragon understood the unfairness and raw ambition behind this attack on his former protégé. Perhaps the Firemind even felt bad about Ral nearly losing his hard-won position. Ral understood that the living guild pack could not interfere in the internal workings of any one guild, not even the guild he had founded. Yet, the more Ral stared at the dragon, shiny and reborn, the less certain Ral became that Niv's famous Firemind had been paying any attention whatsoever to his successor's predicament. For all Ral knew, Niv was thinking about neural core weavers, or maybe about his supper. With the leadership question settled in his favor, Guildmaster Zarek had consciously taken on a generous air, making a show of recognizing and acknowledging Chamberlain Marie's many skills and talents, assuring her she still had a prominent place within the Izzet Guild. Then he dismissed everyone for the time being, ordering Marie to nominate and convene his new scientific cabinet, something that Raoul, in his brief tenure as Guildmaster, had not had the opportunity to do until this time. What with the evil megalomaniac dragon to defeat and everything, Raoul had won, confirming his ascendancy, but the whole thing had been stressful and draining, and had briefly made him question whether he even wanted to be Izzet's guild master. Now, as Raoul approached his apartment, he did see one silver lining in all of this. Tomic. With Kaya back on Ravnica, Orzov's acting guildmaster could step down. He'd still have his work as her advisor and assistant, but he'd now have considerably more free time for Raoul. And it was clear that Tomic's time, love, and support were things Raoul would very much need. He opened the apartment door, calling out his lover's name. But Tomic wasn't there. Just a note. Guild business? Home late. Love you. T. Chapter 79. Tezzeret. Tezzeret planeswalked into the small room, in a shower of blue and silver sparks, unfolding himself from the void within his chest. Immediately, the artificer felt not claustrophobic, but cramped. A small cabinet like this couldn't, or at least shouldn't, contain him or his plans anymore. He found himself actually resenting the space. Still, he had always been pragmatic. If this was the most secure location for the rendezvous, so be it. He looked about him. The room was empty, except for a full-length wall-mounted mirror and two large, soft leather-backed chairs. Tezzeret cleared his throat, and within a few seconds, the Wanderer stepped out of the liquid surface of the mirror to join him. Tezzeret asked, "Did it work?" The Wanderer replied, "Unfortunately, no. It's disappointing, but Ral actually confessed his failure. I didn't think he had it in him." "Honestly, neither did I." "He has the love of a good man, or at least he thinks so. That belief seems to have changed him." Tezzeret rolled his eyes. "Funny how weakness can occasionally and accidentally result in strength. Where does this leave us?" "If Ral had not confessed," said the Wanderer, as she morphed into Lazav, "I had, per our plan, been prepared to blackmail him. That's no longer possible, as I don't have anything else on him, yet." Tezzeret scowled and growled, "Is it all bad news?" "Not all. I have my hooks deep into the Golgari. Vraska has put herself completely at my mercy." "Does she now?" Tezzeret asked, feeling slightly less grumpy. "Slightly. She knows she's in trouble. She doesn't yet know from where the trouble will spring." "What exactly do you have on her?" "I'd say that's not your concern." "I'd insist it's very much my concern. Our agreement dictates." Yes, I know. Which is why I was about to answer your question before you so rudely interrupted. Tezzeret exhaled. "Apologies. You seem tense, my friend. It's the fortress, isn't it? The Wanderer, the real Wanderer." mentioned you had abandoned it. Exactly. It was a worthwhile sacrifice in exchange for granting you control over Zarek and the Izzet. Now it feels like I gave up a perfectly good headquarters for nothing. You can probably reclaim it. You think so? Who'd ever think to look for you there now? Maybe. We'll see. In any case, we're on the subject of Vraska. Have a seat, and I'll gladly reveal all. Tezzeret nodded, and both of them sat down. The chair was surprisingly comfortable. So comfortable, in fact, that Tezzeret was convinced a comfort spell had been placed on the thing, one designed to lull Lazav's guests into a false sense of ease. But Tezzeret didn't do ease. Lazav thinks he's handling me, but when the time comes, he'll learn the opposite was true all along. He gripped the arm of the chair with his now even more perfect Ethereum hand and gave it a little crunch, damaging the chair slightly and breaking the spell. He was instantly less comfortable, which was just fine with Tezzeret, who asked again about Vraska. Yes, Vraska. Well, despite her claims to the Living Guild Pack and the 10 guilds, I know and have proof that neither Vraska nor Chandra killed Dovin Ban. So, obviously, when the time is right, I'll hold that knowledge over her head, forcing her to side with Demir on Transguild matters, or else risk revealing to every guild, including her own, that she's a liar who cannot be trusted. Better still, Vraska doesn't even have full control of the Golgari, as Ban didn't have the opportunity to reveal his full plan to her. Good. Chaos within the Golgari will be useful to the both of us. My thoughts exactly. And the Orzhov? We have the inside track there too, having 3 leaders, Kaya the figurehead, Vrona the functionary, and Karlov, the power behind the throne, may have appeared clever to our dear Teysa, but the current Orzhov structure that she's created is ripe for us to exploit. So 3 down, 7 to go. Don't forget Simic. Ah yes, 4 down, 6 to go. Exactly. Our plans proceed apace. Chapter 80. Anna Ayora. Anna woke with a start, desperate to remember her name, but it all came back to her soon enough. Amnesia isn't one of my gifts, unfortunately. Where's Jace with a good brain wipe when you really need him? Jace. Well, enough of that. She is Anna Ayora, and Anna Ayora is on Fiora. Ayora, Fiora. That must be where I got the name. It bloody well rhymes, which makes it a pretty asinine choice, but she wrote it down. Too late to change it now, at least not at the Fiddler's. She rose to wash. The bathroom was down the hall. This wasn't Liliana's kind of place, but maybe she can learn to make it Anna's kind of place. The water came out brown at first. No, this will not be Anna's kind of place. No matter how humble Anna waxes, she will demand better than this. Eventually, the water cleared, and she splashed it cold across her face. She looked for soap and found none. Minutes later, she was back in her room. She pulled open the curtains with some trepidation, half expecting the tree opposite her window to be occupied with hundreds of ravens, weighing down every limb, bough, and branch. But there were no ravens, no birds even. so she opened the window, allowing a cool breeze to play across her damp, somewhat tangled hair. Anna, it seems, doesn't have the same self-respect or vanity that Liliana once possessed. That will have to change too, eventually. She dragged a heavy wooden chair over to the window, sat down, and stared down the road leading up to the inn, waiting, waiting, waiting at the window, rapidly growing more and more impatient, antsy, anxious. She kept thinking about how Kaya, Teo, and Rat had come to Dominaria to kill her, but had wound up saving her instead. They were no gatewatch, but they might in fact be better for her. Works in progress, like I am, like Ana Iora is. The thought occurred that they'd be easier to manipulate since, by this time, the gatewatch pretty much knew all her tricks. No, damn it, stop that. She was right to reprimand herself. She didn't want to be that person anymore. She didn't want to be Liliana Vess, at least not for the time being. She knew she was still damaged goods, still in need of a redemption she hadn't yet achieved. She barely believed she was capable of it, let alone deserving of it. Really? It's not fair to the three of them. They shouldn't be burdened with keeping her secrets, with guiding her course, with Liliana Vess. She was practically ready to bolt. Take off, planeswalk to somewhere obvious. Innistrad, probably. Let Kaya hunt me down there and take me out as she vowed. Let her kill Liliana Vess for crimes against the people of Ravnica and for the crime of not wanting to be saved. Or not wanting to be saved enough. Not wanting to be Anna enough. The idea sounded fairly appealing, and honestly, the only thing stopping Liliana from bolting was that she wasn't exactly sure why she was bolting. Or maybe I do know. I'm too tired, too broken to gut it out, to do the work, to make myself into someone else, someone new, to turn Liliana into Anna. Damn it, I hate introspection. She stood. It was time to leave, to planeswalk. She was ready. She'd go, unless they came. Unless they came now. Or now. Or maybe now. What are you doing? Since when are you an indecisive twit? Since now, apparently. Another difference between Liliana and Anna. She wondered absently how long she had slept. She wondered absently where she could buy a decent wardrobe or summon the magic to transmogrify her current clothes into something presentable. She wondered absently about how long it had been since she had eaten anything, and if it had been as long as she suspected, why she wasn't hungry. She wondered absently when exactly she had resumed her seat, and how any chair could be this uncomfortable. Then she spotted Kaya and Teo walking up the lane toward the inn. Without conscious thought, she was out the door and out of her room, down the stairs and outside, ridiculously thrilled to see them. "Is she here?" she asked, semi-desperate. Teo nodded and said, "She's right here, between us." For some reason, Anna needed more reassurance and looked to Kaya, who put her arm around Air and said, "Here." Anna focused, and there, with Kaya's arm around her shoulder, was Rat, smiling and happy to see her, happy to be seen by her. "Hello, Miss Anna," she said. "How did you... I'm a little bit psychic, remember? Anything about you just screams Anna now. Or Miss Anna. Sorry." "No, it's fine. It's fine." Liliana discovered she was wiping her eyes and quickly chastised herself. "I don't care if you are Anna. You are not that sappy." But she had to admit that it warmed the atrophied stone that passed for her heart to see that this innocent child was happy to have Anna Iora of Fiora in her life. Yes, being with these three will definitely be better than being with the Gatewatch. Besides, the Gatewatch must all continue to believe Liliana Vess was dead. She could never see any of them again. I can never see Jace again. Chapter 81. Jace Beleren. Lying in bed together, wrapped in each other's arms, Vraska had told Jace everything. He had tried not to scowl when she described how she had used the vulnerable Chandra in her ploy to fool the guilds. Vraska wasn't proud of herself, and obviously not thrilled that the whole plan had backfired horribly. But she still felt, given what she knew at the time, that the risk had been worth the cost. But Jace could tell Vraska was waiting to see whether that cost now included him. Desperate to reassure her and himself, Jace shoehorned his thoughts into a further betrayal of Chandra with a promise to keep his lover's counsel, saying, "We all have secrets." She had kissed him then. Wonder if she'd have kissed me if I had said, "I'm telling." He ruefully decided it paid sometimes to have a somewhat loose alliance with the concept of integrity. She laid a hand on his chest. He pulled her closer. They were silent for a time, but this wasn't an easy, comfortable silence. Both were waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next revelation, the next crisis. Or just for one of us to take a risk and speak. So he spoke. "Will you still come with me to Vryn? Just for a little while?" She didn't answer instantly, and so he kept talking to fill the brief silence. "I mean, now that I have all my memories back, I need to rediscover my past. I guess I told you that already, and I'd very much like to share that rediscovery with the woman I love. But I guess I told you that already too." "It's all right. I like hearing it." He waited. Finally, she sighed and said, "I want to go with you, Jace. Sincerely. By Crocked, I'd love to go. I'd love to leave all this behind and be with you. Be there as you found yourself, for better or worse. But someone out there killed Ban. She, he, or they may know the truth and could use it to destroy me. And if it were just about me, I'd still go with you. I'd risk that for you, certainly for one short week. But the swarm is vulnerable. I've made them vulnerable, and I simply can't leave now." Jace nodded. "I understand. I do." But deep down, he knew she'd always choose the Golgari over him, and maybe that wasn't even wrong. Maybe it was exactly how she should be choosing. Maybe he also knew what that meant. She'd commit any sin for the Golgari, then confess her sin after, so that I either bless her fait accompli or reject it and destroy us. Vraska and I, we aren't going to make it as a couple." Still, he wasn't quite ready to let go. He said, "I understand why you have to stay. Do you understand why I have to go?" "I do." He kissed her gratefully. She kissed him back, passionately. They made love again, grasping at each other, desperate to hold on. Then he showered and put on the clean clothes Storev had laid out for him earlier. She watched him from the bed, naked and enticing and a little frightened, perhaps. "Well, I'm scared too." He kissed her lips gently. "I'll be back soon," he said. "Soon as I possibly can." "I'll be here," she said. "I'll be waiting." He kissed her one more time. Then Jace summoned up a hazy memory of Rin, and Plains walked away. Prologue. Chapter 82. Kaya. Araethia's newly founded and newly reunited team of 4 sat on hard wooden benches around a wobbly wooden table in the courtyard in front of Fiddler's Inn as a little yellow-green goblin child served them their supper, or in any case, served Kaya, Teo, and Anna their supper. Teo ordered double to accommodate Rat. It was humble fare, beans, with bits of ham, and toast, which Anna absently pushed around with her fork, but which the other 3 enjoyed well enough. Madame Blaise would be appalled, but Kaya had eaten worse on her travels. And the wine's fairly decent. Once the goblin walked away, Liliana Vest leaned forward and said, "Listen, I am who I am. Don't expect wholesale change. I'm a necromancer. Death is and will continue to be my stock in trade." Kaya thought Liliana sounded overly confrontational, over cynical, but was trying a little too hard to sound that way. Kaya wasn't psychic like Rat, but she could sense Liliana's vulnerability and need, or Anna's vulnerability and need anyway. Kaya also noticed how hard Liliana was working to focus and maintain focus on Rat, desperate to keep Araethia in her consciousness, almost as if Liliana was feeding off the girl's innocence and optimism, and Kaya couldn't immediately decide if that was good or bad. Then she remembered it was how she herself had felt just a few short days ago, like she was feeding off both Rat's and Teo's light. She could hardly condemn Liliana for wanting and needing what she herself had wanted and needed. What I still want and need from them, honestly. So Kaya was determined to give Liliana a chance. After all, she'd shown up here on Fiora at the Fiddler's and waited for them, just as Rat had known she would. That seemed a good sign. Maybe the 4 of them might work as a team. Besides, if our next stop after Fiora goes as I expect, I'll need their help. All their help. Maybe Liliana's help especially. Beyond that, I could use the company, not to mention the moral support. It was strange. Kaya had spent the last 6 years as a solo act, the lone assassin walking from plane to plane, sending phantoms, haints, ghosts, and spirits, plus the occasional zombie or vampire, to her or his or their final rest. She hadn't thought it bothered her to live a life of itinerant solitude. It was only now, with this sudden acquisition of 2 good friends and 1 dangerous question mark, that the lone assassin realized what a lonely assassin she had become. She relished her time with Teo and Rat, genuinely enjoying their companionship. She didn't feel parental toward them exactly, more like a big sister, which carried its own responsibilities, she supposed. Though truth be told, she didn't feel burdened at all. To the contrary, she felt tremendously unburdened. Tomek had lifted those blasted Orzhov contracts from her soul. The 2 teenagers had brought her joy and friendship, and last night, she'd even managed to finally have that good cathartic cry she'd been needing and wanting ever since the War of the Spark had ended. She had cried for Gideon Jura, for Dak Faden even. She had cried for Hekara, both for the Razor Witch's tragic death and for her stunning resurrection, which had clearly cost Hekara some piece of herself, not to mention her friendship with Rat. And Kaya had cried for herself. The grief had, as she had predicted, caught her unawares, in bed just after she had blown out a last candle, generating great heaving sobs for over an hour as she mourned people she loved and people she barely knew as the enormity of Ravnica's tragedy and loss finally hit her. She eventually cried herself to sleep and woke up, grateful. Only a few days ago, she had felt numb. Not a ghost assassin, but a ghost herself. Now, I can breathe again. All these thoughts raced through Kaya's mind in a flash. She downed an entire glass of wine and poured herself another. Belatedly, she realized that Anna was still looking at her, expecting some kind of response. She had to mentally turn back the clock, even to remember what it was the woman had just said to her, and fill the time by busying herself with the drinking of more wine. Finally recalling Anna's last defiant statement, Kaya shrugged and said, "I'm still a ghost assassin. Our powers are our powers. I don't expect you to become a creature of sunlight and light. I expect you to use what you have to redeem past sins. If it helps, or at least puts things in perspective, that's what I'm trying to do as well." Rat said, "Oh yeah, me too." The other three all looked at her with cock-eyed brows, even Teo. "I've done stuff," Rat said defensively. "I'm a thief after all." Teo said, "I bet you've never once stolen anything from anyone who couldn't afford to lose what you took." "Of course not. That would be awful and mean. Very mean. Plus, why would I do that when I can steal from someone who could afford the loss, you know?" With perfect deadpan delivery, Anna said, "You're a monster, all right." The rat pointed at her. "See? She gets me." Then the young woman started to giggle. It was an infectious sound. They were all chuckling soon. Even Anna, who caught herself and abruptly stopped, staring at her half-empty wine glass and murmuring, "I must be intoxicated." And still chuckling, Teo asked, "Where will we go next?" Kaya took another sip and then put down her glass, steeling herself for what she knew she had to do. She said, "There's a situation I've been avoiding for months. Nicol Bolas was supposed to help me with it, but obviously that's not happening now." Anna said, "Help from Bolas? Never helped anyone but Bolas." Kaya nodded. "Agreed. In fact, I've come to suspect the dragon may have instigated the problem himself in order to force me into trading favors with him. In any case, it's time I face this thing head on. We'll rest here at the inn tonight, because tomorrow we're planeswalking to Tolvada, my home world." And that, folks, is the end of the War of the Spark Forsaken. I hope you guys enjoyed the series, and I hope I did well. Please leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share the content to your friends if you know anyone. It'll help a lot. It really will. Every little bit helps. Anyway, it's been a journey. That has been such a wonderful journey for us. I'll see you guys in the next one.